It is the year 484 in England. A medieval battle rages. King Arthur and his knights are looking down the barrel of defeat at the hands of the Saxons, and their only hope lies with the magician Merlin. Elsewhere, Merlin, in reality merely a drunkard, rides up to a long-crashed alien ship and beseeches the occupants for help. He has kept their secret, but now needs their help. The other knights are losing hope, but Arthur believes Merlin will come through. Merlin manages to convince a giant metal red-armored knight at the ship to help, and it presents him with a staff, allowing him to return to the battle with a giant metal dragon. The battle is won in favor of Camelot. 2020. 2 years have passed since the Battle of Hong Kong. Optimus Prime drifts apparently lifeless in space. Both he and Megatron have vanished from Earth, and in spite of the atrocities caused by the CIA's cemetery wind, the vast majority of Earth's governments agreed that all Transformers should be considered illegal out of fear for more of the devastation that had already occurred in the past. With the Transformers reaction force set up to track them down, though they've found refuge in some places such as Cuba, where Seymour Simmons is hanging out with some displaced Autobots. Meanwhile, Transformers continue to arrive in waves while NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory detects something large incoming. 4 kids, craving adventure, breach a fence and enter a section of Chicago ruined by a previous Transformer battle. They stumble on a crashed Transformer ship containing a still-living occupant. TRF sentinels close in on them and warn them that they're trespassing. However, Isabella appears out of nowhere to help, slinging bottles of energon which result in one of the sentinels shooting the another. Isabella's tiny robot Squeaks wraps a cable around the legs of the remaining sentinel and it topples over, allowing the kids time to get away. Pursued by another sentinel, Isabella takes the kids to shelter, a transformer named Canopy whose back is a hollow mound of rubble. They're joined by Squeaks, who's lost his arm in the battle. Canopy and the kids start moving, unaware the TRF has spotted them. Unable to determine what faction Canopy is and with kids possibly in danger, TRF Commander Santos orders an airstrike. The missile takes out Canopy, who thanks a tearful Isabella before dying. The kids are soon rescued by Cade Yeager and Bumblebee, who destroy another sentinel. Cade drives the kids to the border of the no-go zone and drops them off before returning to the crashed ship. Despite his efforts, the pilot within dies, but not before attempting to present Cade with the talisman. Cade does not take it. He reports the pilot's death to Bumblebee shortly before Barricade appears and Cade is suddenly surrounded by TRF forces. Meanwhile, the talisman sprouts legs and crawls away from the ship. Cade refuses to divulge where the other Transformers are. Bumblebee arrives, only to be blown to pieces by the TRF. Moments later, the parts start reconnecting as Bumblebee reassembles himself, sending the TRF forces into disarray as he does so. He and Cade take Santos hostage, but the standoff is interrupted by the arrival of Lennox, who tries to talk Cade and Bee into standing down. Hound's appearance settles things however, and Cade, Bee, and Hound leave, though the TRF manages to surreptitiously attach a tracking device onto Bumblebee. Lennox reports to General Morshower, who plays a recording of Barricade reporting back to Megatron. Megatron is disappointed Barricade failed to secure the talisman as it is the object they need to lead them to the staff, but Barricade believes the TRF will lead them to it. Morshower orders Lennox to return to his covert infiltration of the TRF. Optimus's voyage through space comes to an end as he crashes on the ravaged surface of Cybertron, which has been mysteriously disassembled into many pieces. He encounters and attacks Quintessa, who claims to be his creator and the prime of life, but she easily restrains him. As he returns to the junkyard he calls home, Cade realizes that the talisman has somehow ended up in his vehicle. In England, Cogman alerts Sir Edmund Burton to the arrival of the talisman. Elsewhere in England, Vivienne Wembley wins a game of polo for her team before returning to the University of Oxford. She lectures her class on King Arthur, someone she believes to be a made-up legend. Unaware she's being watched by Burton, Burton gives instructions to a nearby parked car. Quintessa tells Optimus that he must retrieve her staff, stolen by her night guardians and hidden on Earth. Drift and Crosshairs are hanging out in the junkyard. Cade, Hound, and Bumblebee stop off on their way back so Cade can banter with the local authority, Chief Sherman, who complains that his cruiser has been stolen. The trio continue to the junkyard where Jimmy and Wheelie are looking at online photos of custom cars. They are unaware Isabella and Squeaks have stowed away on Hound. While Bumblebee and Crosshairs come to blows, Cade persuades Grimlock to cough up Sherman's cruiser, or what's left of it. Day Trader arrives, bringing Starscream's head and a new voice box for Bumblebee. He's interested in Cade's talisman, and says it's a sign of the impending apocalypse. Isabella fronts up to Cade and attempts to persuade him to let her stay. They return to Cade's trailer for antics with the baby Dinobots and trade stories of lost family members. Isabella manages to impress Cade with her knowledge of Cybertronian physiology and he's convinced to let her stay. In Namibia, scientists arrive at a location to find a giant metal horn poking out of the ground. News of the horn, and 5 more like it, get back to Simmons and Burton. Meanwhile, the NASA scientists meet with presidential staff to report they have detected an approaching planet, which they say will arrive in 3 days. Helped by Hound, Cade makes an untraceable satellite phone call to his daughter at college, but is unable to speak to her for fear that his voice will be recognized by the CIA, and can only listen as she tries to convince him to get a girlfriend. Lennox meets Morshower at the Pentagon for a briefing on the horns. Megatron has been spotted visiting them and has snatched up 2 CIA operatives as hostages. Lennox and some lawyers meet with Megatron to negotiate the return of some of his men. They agree to release Mohawk, Dreadbot, and Nitro Zeus. Berserker, however, turns out to be a step too far, and Megatron is forced to select Onslaught instead. Morshower believes they can use Megatron so they can get hold of Cade's talisman themselves. As morning breaks over the junkyard, the Decepticons prepare to move in, observed by the TRF. Isabella attaches a new arm to Squeaks, before helping Cade fit Bumblebee's new voice box. B is not happy with the result, which sounds like a GPS. Sherman gives the group advanced warning of the impending Decepticon assault, and the Autobots and humans scramble to get ready to escape. Megatron's group arrives to find the junkyard deserted, at least until Hound pops up and starts shooting. Megatron returns fire. The Autobot group heads into the nearby town, where Drift swiftly disables the tracking device on B. Grimlock and Slug ambush the TRF forces en route to the town. Santos has a swarm of unmanned drones sent in. The Decepticons arrive in the middle of town and immediately spot Squeaks, which draws Isabella out in an attempt to save the tiny Autobot. Cade detonates the explosives hidden around town and flees with Isabella, pursued by Barricade. The con is knocked aside by Grimlock, who also devours Dreadbot. As the battle rapidly turns against the Decepticons, with Onslaught being killed by Drift and Crosshairs, Megatron calls a retreat. Mohawk, however, is left behind and is subsequently reduced to a head by Bumblebee. Cade, Isabella, and Jimmy take cover in a disused church as the TRF drones move in. However, the drones continue to pursue them through the church. Cade and Isabella take 2 of them out, but Jimmy tries to bluff a third, banking on the idea it's using facial recognition. He gets shot anyway, but fortunately it was only a beanbag. The trio head into another disused building and enter a lift where they encounter Cogman, who announces he's come to collect Cade. The discussion ends when a drone arrives, and Cade ends up clinging to it as it flies wildly around the street. Cogman phones Sir Barton to report the bad news. But fortunately Cade survives his impromptu flight, partly thanks to the talisman protecting him from bullets. He manages to ride another drone to the ground and is met by Cogman, who explains that he's important because of the talisman. Crosshairs attempts to prevent Cogman from doing anything, only for the smaller robot to break his finger. Cogman convinces Cade to go with him and leave the others. Cade and B accompany Cogman on a plane to England. Morshower and Lennox track the flight, and note that Megatron's group is giving pursuit. Lennox is ordered to take the TRF team to the UK as well. Simmons calls Sir Barton to let him know a book has been tracked down. NASA continues tracking the incoming planet, now identified as Cybertron. Quintessa reveals to Optimus that Earth is actually Unicron and that they're going to kill him with the staff. An act which will destroy Earth and restore Cybertron. Optimus's optics turn purple as Quintessa addresses him as Nemesis Prime. Optimus swears to fight anyone who interferes with his new mission. Vivian and her family watch a news report on the giant horns. Conversation turns to her dead father, and her mother suggests she check her father's study in case there's anything useful for her work. Disinterested, she instead gets into her car where an invitation falls out of the glove compartment. The car takes off of its own accord and starts driving her through the streets of London. When she smashes a window, the car complains in a French accent and throws her into the trunk. She calls for help, having realized she's in a transformer, and the car scans a passing Lamborghini, reconfiguring itself into a copy of the other vehicle. Cade's plane lands at Sir Barton's castle, where he and Bumblebee are shot at by a tank transformer. Sir Barton apologizes and takes a look at the talisman. Hot Rod arrives carrying Vivian, who is unhappy at being kidnapped. Once things calm down, Sir Barton explains he's the last of the Order of the Witwickens. Cade's boorish behavior towards Vivian results in him being assaulted by Cogman. Sir Barton shows off portraits of his family tree in the Witwickens, and relates how the Transformers have been helping humans for centuries, such as when Bumblebee and Hot Rod took part in World War II. They head to another building which houses the original round table used by King Arthur and his knights when they teamed up with the 12 Guardian Knights. Further, there is a legend that a last knight would be found, and thanks to possessing the talisman, that's Cade. Only Merlin's DNA can unlock the power of the staff, which is where Vivian comes in as a direct descendant of Merlin. She has no idea where the staff might be though. Further discussion is halted as MI6 and TRF forces arrive to assault the castle. Despite one of the elderly Autobots attempting to defend the castle only to power down as a result of his aging, Hot Rod's time-stopper weapon gives the group enough time to escape. Simmons makes an irate call to Sir Barton, who is currently being pursued through London and is late for the appointment at Trinity Library. Bumblebee arrives at Vivian's house with her and Cade, and the pair start rifling through her father's study in search of a clue. Sir Barton's dropped off at the library, but Simmons demands to be inducted into the Order of Witwickens before he'll point Sir Barton to the book, which reveals Earth as Unicron and points them to Stonehenge. Cade and Vivian find a clue in an old pop-up book which points them to the HMS Alliance at a naval museum. The TRF arrive at the house. Meanwhile, Sir Barton and Cogman switch cars and a high-speed chase through the streets of London ensues. Cade and Vivian, now also making a getaway in Bumblebee, let them know about the Navy Museum. Cogman manages to shake his pursuers while Bumblebee manages to shake Barricade by blasting the Decepticon. Bumblebee reaches the Naval Museum at the same time as Cogman and Sir Barton, and they have the HMS Alliance evacuated. Sir Barton leaves the others to it. explaining that the submarine, in reality a transformer, knows the way to the staff. The sub launches, with Bumblebee clinging to the exterior so he can come along for the ride. The sub's departure is noted by TRF and they track it as it heads away from England. The TRF scramble their own submersibles to give chase. A nuclear sub fires missiles at the Alliance, which responds by ramming the other sub and diving deeper into the ocean. Cogman fires himself out through a torpedo tube. Sir Barton arrives at number 10 to see the Prime Minister, but is turned away. Cogman returns to the sub with a couple of fish he's caught. Vivian and Cade share clumsy sexual chemistry until Cogman reveals he's made sushi as a last meal. Sir Barton takes a secret back entrance into number 10 to talk to the PM, holding off security by threatening to release the watch that killed Hitler. Sir Barton tells the PM to mobilize the military to Stonehenge. The Alliance zeroes in on a vast undersea transformer ship, which lights up as they approach. The pursuing TRF subs also spot the ship, but have to make their own way in after the airlock doors close behind the Alliance. The Alliance surfaces beyond the airlock, and the group starts exploring. Back at the junkyard, Isabella, Squeaks, and Crosshairs look up at the approaching Cybertron. Elsewhere, NASA and ESA scientists give a briefing as the approaching planet scrapes the surface of the Moon. The Doomsday News is broadcast on television around the world. The subs carrying the TRF teams led by Lennox and Santos emerge into an air pocket, and they move out. Day Trader arrives back at the junkyard with the Autobots ship, and the group there prepares to head to England to help out. Cade and Vivian find a chamber holding motionless Guardian Knights. Cybertron moves into Earth's atmosphere, passing the International Space Station. Vivian touches a Celtic engraving which reveals Merlin's sarcophagus, inside which they find a wooden staff. As the TRF moves through the same chamber, one of the knights springs to life. Cade keeps it distracted as the TRF attacks it, eventually bringing it down. Vivian grabs the wooden staff which transforms into metal in her hands. Lennox and Santos attempt to get her to hand it over, but she reveals only she can use it. More knights revive and attack, however a short time later, Optimus kills them and forces Vivian to turn the staff over to him. Sending the others back to the sub, Cade, Lennox, and Bumblebee go after Optimus. Bumblebee fights with Optimus atop the vast ship as it comes to the surface. Bumblebee manages to get the better of his former leader, and Cade attempts to persuade Optimus to stop fighting. As the ship rises out of the water, Optimus is able to get the upper hand and is prepared to end Bumblebee when B manages to talk in his own voice, shaking Quintessa's influence. Optimus drops his sword, just in time for Megatron and Nitro to swoop in and claim the staff. After the Decepticons leave, the remaining Guardian Knights emerge from the ship and are ready to execute Optimus for aiding Quintessa's cause. The talisman transforms into a sword which Cade uses to block the killing strike. And the Knights recognize Cade as a knight. Though Prime is ready to die, Cade talks him out of sacrificing himself. And Optimus announces they have to destroy Quintessa with the other Autobots show up in their ship. Cybertron makes touchdown on Earth, causing untold destruction. Megatron arrives at Stonehenge with the staff. Lennox contacts Morshower with the coordinates for the end game, an ignition chamber which is part of one of the dangling pieces of Cybertron, and military forces move in. Cade comes up with a plan to load Ospreys onto the Autobot ship so they can get close enough to the ignition chamber to land. NASA thinks this is a bad plan and works on an alternate idea. The massive ship continues towards Stonehenge where the Decepticons, along with Sir Barton and the military forces, are waiting. At Sir Barton's signal, the military opens fire on the Decepticons as the massive ship arrives directly overhead. The Autobots regroup with Cade and the TRF, and Optimus Prime gives a stirring speech before blasting off. Cogman manages to find Sir Burton, who had been blasted by Megatron sometime prior to the Autobots' arrival, shortly before he expires. Megatron returns to the ignition chamber where Quintessa is waiting. She plugs the staff into the floor, and lightning starts arcing about. The pieces of Cybertron start moving about and joining, causing those on the ground to run for their lives. Massive worldwide destruction ensues. As the Autobot ship carries Autobots, knights and humans up to their fates, Cade asks Vivian out on a date. Jets soften up the defenses around the ignition chamber while the humans all board the Ospreys, and Cade has it out with Santos. Shamed, the TRF troops all rip off their insignias. The Ospreys launch, and Isabella and Squeaks reveal they've stowed away on the one carrying Cade and Vivian. Covered by the jets and the giant three-headed dragon, the Ospreys head to the ignition chamber and crash land on the surface. The landing site is immediately a war zone as Megatron and his Decepticons stand in their way. Lennox spots the entrance to the chamber, but the team is pinned down by a gun emplacement. Isabella instructs Squeaks to go blow the gun emplacement up. Infernicus forms under Megatron's orders and knocks Bumblebee and company out of the air. Meanwhile, the NASA scientists have come up with a plan to use nukes to cause a nearby chunk of Cybertron to destroy the ignition chamber. Morshower contacts Lennox to let him know the new plan, and the TRF forces start withdrawing. Squeaks succeeds in blowing up the gun emplacement. Optimus arrives aboard the Dragon and takes out Infernicus. As the TRF troops parachute off the platform, the jets nuke the neighboring chunk of Cybertron. Vivian drops her parachute and heads back towards the chamber, followed by Cade. The chunk hits the platform containing the chamber. However, despite the devastating impact, the chamber continues to function. The chamber tumbles down until it comes to rest on another part of Cybertron. Inside, chaos reigns as the Autobots and Decepticons fight and Vivian grabs the staff. Optimus kicks Megatron through a wall shortly before another impact sends the chamber tumbling out of the sky. Bumblebee kills Nitro Zeus and blasts Quintessa as Optimus manages to distract her. Quintessa vanishes in a flash of blue light. Vivian finally pulls the staff free, shutting down the ignition chamber just before it crashes to the ground. Optimus dramatically drives out of the cloud of debris raised by its impact, carrying Cade and Vivian. As everyone reunites, Optimus gives another stirring speech about how Earth and Cybertron are now joined as one before the Autobots depart for Cybertron alongside the Guardian Knights.